Hi, my name is Achim Hoffmann. I'm a water scientist and inventor. I got my doctorate degree in chemical engineering at a German cleantech institute. I then took the big plunge and launched my first water science startup, and it failed. Then I started in venture capital to help other research scientists to get their science out of the labs and turn it into businesses. And I started a thought experiment, how to fix climate. And that took over my life. I suddenly came across a potential solution, and it did something to me. It gave me hope. And then I went on it every evening, every weekend, until 9 months later, I just quit my job. And I've been working on this moonshot ever since. Climate change is the biggest threat we are facing globally. An overwhelming complex problem involving countries, politics, economies. But if you actually distill it down, it is a single molecule problem. We've got too much CO2 in the atmosphere, which creates this insulation layer in the atmosphere, which then heats up the Earth. And that layer is getting thicker the more we put into it. We need to find a solution fast to cut that insulation down again. And that requires massive scale investments. But there are technologies that can remove CO2 from the atmosphere, which is what we have to do at scale. But they have got one massive problem. They are all pure cost. A bill that someone has to pick up, and that's not a very attractive proposition. The opportunity I see is building a green fuel industry. Show to the regulators there's a way to keep the planes flying and to keep the ships shipping. We need green fuel challenger startups to do that. To build a green fuel molecule, you need three things. You need energy, water, and CO2. Suddenly, CO2 is part of a profitable business proposition. While initially the CO2 will go back into the atmosphere when we burn those fuels. But what will have happened is, when we scale this up, that we have a massive scale system in place that can remove those CO2 molecules from the sky. Once those costs are down for the fuel production, we can start thinking about pumping fuels back into the old oil wells. And by that, really reversing what we've done to the planet. And that will reduce the insulation layer. That will solve the climate change problem. The big bet I'm making is to use warm ocean currents to produce the currently most expensive part of green fuel production, hydrogen and CO2, but at a low cost. More than 90% of all global warming heat goes into our oceans, destroying marine life, coral reefs. All the energy in the oceans already collected over the last 100 years would actually fuel the planet for at least 1,000 years. It's massive. They also pick up a quarter of all the carbon emissions. It's like a storage buffer, and by that increasing the ocean acidity, harmful to marine life. During COVID, I identified a scientific pathway that converts heat energy in water directly to hydrogen. And at the side effect, it also releases some of the stored CO2. By installing large flow-through rigs in the warm global currents, like the Gulf Stream, we can release gases from the ocean, capture them, convert them into fuel, and then use them again or put them away. Green fuel production while fixing the oceans and removing CO2. The simple question I ask myself constantly is, what is the next most critical problem I need to solve? And what's the minimum acceptable solution? Something that's good enough. Because time has a massive value, especially in startups. It is applying a startup mentality where you build a minimum viable product without having all the answers and just go with it. You need to juggle all of this, constantly adjusting your critical path. When you work on something like this, you will have a lot of opinions and questions, and you have to be very smart about it and what comments can be ignored, which ones go to the to-do list, and which ones need to be tackled immediately, especially when you work with very limited resources.